I was recently invited to a classified gathering of some of the top scientists, engineers, military strategists in all of America. We were discussing the EMP threat. Now, we covered this in episode 22 with Lieutenant General Stephen Quast, the former director of the CIA, Jim Woolsey, and Air Force Major David Stuckenberg. These three were prominent at the conference. In fact, General Quast called it together. We held war games, and it was all at Air Force University. I learned a lot, and I came away with a couple of very important and unclassified observations that I can share with you. First, everyone there was brilliant. I even met one of my old friends from high school who went on to get a PhD in physics from Cornell. Talk about a small world. They were all smart and dedicated and focused. They knew the science and the engineering backwards and forwards, and yet not one discussion addressed what I think is the real underlying issue. Yes, there were discussions about how a high-altitude EMP, or HEMP, could threaten our electric grid and civil society. But the real core of the issue is not if it could be done or how it could be done. The technology is already known, and it has been known for more than half a century. What is also known is that the sun itself could launch an EMP attack. Basically, the sun regularly shoots out coronal mass ejections, bursting with energy. Occasionally, these are in line of sight toward the Earth, and when that happens, a burst of energy creates a natural EMP, electromagnetic pulse, that is capable of destroying our electronics and maybe taking down the electric grid. The last one happened in 1859, and it's known as a Carrington event. It's named after the amateur astronomer who witnessed it. If that happened today, our grid would be severely damaged. According to British insurer Lloyd's of London, we could see such a major solar storm hit about once every 150 years. There was a smaller version that hit Canada in 1889, and the smaller version should happen about every 50 years. NASA has estimated that every decade there's a 12% chance that we will have a major solar storm. The point is, we're overdue for such a storm, and our electric grid is at risk. Basically, if the electric grid were destroyed by an EMP, whether it's natural or man-made, it'd take a long time to rebuild it. We'd have no food, no water, no sanitation, no gasoline, no medicines. Hospitals would shut down. It's chaos and disaster until you get the grid back up. In a worst-case scenario, more than 90% of the existing population might die from a grid outage of a year or more, according to experts. That would be essentially a nation-ending event because all of our lives depend so much on reliable electricity. This isn't a matter of new science. The science has been studied and understood for over half a century. We know how to do this to our enemies, and they know how to do it to us. The real issue is economic on all fronts. Would the Chinese, for example, use an HEMP, a HEMP, to wipe out our grid? It's really an economic decision. The cost of the operation would be minimal, but we do owe them $1 trillion. And then there's the loss of consumer markets, the risks of retaliation, and the impact of the global economy. These are all serious considerations that the Chinese have to take into account before they would consider launching such an attack. As we held a conference at the Air Force University talking about the practicalities and the science, I imagine that the Chinese have held several classified conferences where they are talking about the economy and the impacts. We talk to the scientists, they're talking to the economists, calculating the cost of such an undertaking. Assuming the attack could be made without attribution, meaning we'd never be certain enough about who hit us to retaliate, and that is unfortunately quite possible, the real question comes down to money. While we use computer simulations to determine how an EMP would hit large-scale transformers and switching stations and might wipe out your iPhone, our adversaries are modeling how they might take America down and how that might impact their gross domestic product.